Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the second class of Lawfare sponsored hacking. Here's the plan for the class. Sean's going to start, just give you some basic stuff from the last week about install, and then I will take over and then lay out everything. Go ahead, Sean.
I just wanted to go over some things that we may have had issues with, common errors, so that if some of you are having these issues and you haven't talked about it, then we will be able to talk about it, which is great. Now, some of you have asked about the 7-zip files. So we went through the Kali install, we went through downloading and installing VirtualBox first, then downloading the VirtualBox virtual machine image. That virtual machine image is compressed, right? They use compression algorithm, fancy word, but it basically means they make the big files smaller, okay? And they use something called 7-zip to do that. So if your operating system, and this is mostly the Windows users I'm talking to, doesn't have a piece of software that can open the 7-zip format, there are 3 options here that are on the GitHub repo. You can see the URL for that, github.com/lawfareblog/hacking cybersecurity. Okay, and pzip, 7-zip, isarc. Your mileage may vary with these tools. Whichever one you want to choose, you can choose. I put pzip first because it's a little easier and more modern looking than some of the other ones. Okay. Now, another error, or problem, or whatever you want to call it, misstep that folks have been seeing, and I sort of glossed over this quickly when we were doing the install on the Mac last time around, is the security and privacy settings in your Mac operating system. Now, these settings have gotten stronger over time, so if you have a newer Mac, you would tend to see that it will prompt you more often for security settings. You go into your control panel, which is not called that on a Mac. It's called System Preferences in the Finder. And you'll see this box here, this thing that's highlighted Security and Privacy. And then you go in and you'll probably see something like this message. System software from developer Oracle, et cetera, et cetera. You have to allow that and then enter your administrator password to let VirtualBox do its thing, basically. Okay. Now here's a bunch of errors. Now why are they all on the same screen? You don't have to read them. It doesn't really matter to know the details, but you'll see a word maybe in there, kernel. And we're going to talk about the kernel and kernel space and what that means a lot today. And in fact, when we demonstrate a keylogger, we're also going to talk about how the kernel can be sort of used against you in your operating system. At any rate, if you see an error like this, and there's been a few on Windows, on a Mac, on the Linux users we have, it should tell you, RC 1908 or some number, and then say something about the kernel. If you restart 9 times out of 10, turning it off and then on again will actually solve this problem. And that's because the kernel loads right after you boot the system. So it's the first thing that loads with your computer, which Scott will get into the details of all that. And it is necessary for the kernel to know that you're using virtualization software in most cases. Okay. And last here, and this was a pretty big issue, but I think we solved it for most users, or users, just used a search engine and figured it out. But the latest Apple models, the Mac M1 and M2s, they have a new chipset. Apple has its own proprietary chipset now. That's not the processor made by Intel or AMD. And because of that, it's a different quote-unquote architecture. It's not 64-bit. So our instructions for VirtualBox, and in fact installing VirtualBox at all, is not possible on these machines. So you have two options. You have Parallels and VMware Fusion. Again, in the GitHub repository, which we also made a quick redirect, lawfareblog.com/hacking, which somebody pasted into the chat very helpfully. You can go out there and follow these instructions, watch some of these videos. The instructions from Kali Linux itself, they have a pretty big documentation section with screenshots, can walk you through that. And you've got a few different options here. Parallels is the first one, okay? I'm not going to go into the details here, but some of you have gone through already. And if you can find someone else who did, or just reach out in the chat and say, hey, I've got a Mac M1, can anybody help me? Have you done this? It'd be good if we could buddy up as much as possible on these things. VMware is the other option. Again, this is from the Kali.org site directly, and that's all linked in the GitHub repository. And then UTM. Now, UTM is shipped directly with the newer Macs. So it's like a virtualization layer that they ship directly. Those instructions are a little more, I don't know if they're complicated, but they're a little more comfortable for folks who are used to modifying their machines. So I'd recommend Parallels, VMware, UTM for those problems. And that's pretty much it. Back to Scott.
Fantastic. This is Information Security and Operating Systems Class 2. You know, today we're going to throw a ton of stuff at you, and what I'm going to ask you is to trust us, because, you know, we're not going to throw so much stuff at you that you're not going to possibly be able to understand it. But I think what you'll need to do is you'll need to do the homework. It won't be that long, but it will reinforce the things that we talk about. And you may want to watch the video again if certain things go by too quickly. But I just want to say that at this point in the class, students tend to be very nervous because so much stuff is thrown at them and they don't see how it connects. We will connect it for you, and you will see as the classes go, you will see how it all links up. I also think it's great, by the way. We'll be teaching you stuff and you will finally understand your error messages. You know, like if you say kernel driver or something, you'll at least know what a kernel driver is. Okay, let me begin what this course is all about, cybersecurity. And what is cybersecurity? It is the information security of your computer and your digital devices. And I want to just talk about what the hell information security is very briefly, because it's actually a very interesting concept, and the ways in which attacks happen. They hacking targets various dimensions of information security. So this is kind of like your standard representation of information security model, called the CIA triad, not Central Intelligence Agency, but confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The idea is when you say information is secure, like that can mean lots of different things. One of it can mean is that like what you want to keep secret stays secret, okay? Or it could mean something else, that is, it's secure against unauthorized tampering. Okay, and that would be the integrity dimension of information security. And then finally, there's availability, which is that you want to access your information. It's secure to the extent that you can access it, and basically other people cannot if they're unauthorized. Okay, now there's several interesting things about the CIA triad, which I want to mention. So let's just talk about so hacking is an attack on information security. So what would be a standard attack on confidentiality? Well, what's kind of often called shoulder surfing. You know, when you just look over somebody's shoulder and you see what they're saying, that's violating their confidentiality. Of course, that's not a very interesting attack from our point of view, although it could be very, very useful. But if I had to say the paradigmatic example of invasion of confidentiality would be a keylogger. So like everything that you type on your computer, the hacker can read. Sean is going to show you how to install a keylogger. Like he'll say it and I'll say it. Don't use it against anybody. That would be very bad. But we'll show you where to find it, how to download it, how to use it, but also more importantly, why it works. Okay. Integrity. What would be your standard attack against integrity? Would be a wiper, like the Shamoon wiper malware that Iran used against Saudi Arabia. So basically, a wiper wipes out your hard drive. And Sean actually will show you how to wipe out your virtual hard drive. We won't do that, of course, but that would affect integrity and availability. The standard kind of paradigmatic attack on availability is a DDoS, a distributed denial of service attack. And we will be doing that in 2 classes, I think. I think next class we'll be doing password cracking. Okay, so those are the dimensions of information security. And what's very interesting about this is that you can't maximize all 3 sides of the triangle at the same time. It's like your standard iron triangle. The more you emphasize the protection of confidentiality, the less you protect either integrity or availability. So let me just give you an example. If you wanted to keep your email really secure, you could have a 50-letter password with special characters and stuff, and nobody would ever break in because no computer could crack the hash on that password, but neither can you. So you can get very high confidentiality, but unless you remember that 50-letter password, you're not getting in either. Let's say you air gap your computer, meaning you disconnect it from anything. No Wi-Fi, no Ethernet, nothing. It's a standalone computer, not connected to any network. Well, that would protect the integrity of your data. Unfortunately, it's really going to affect people's ability to access the information because it's air gapped. Like you won't be able to access it. So you have high integrity but low availability. Okay, so let me, of course, attacks can implicate more than one aspect of information security. So this is not like something just attacks confidentiality or availability. It can attack multiple dimensions. It just can't do them all maximally. Okay, so there's always going to be trade-offs involved. Okay, so then what is hacking? Okay, hacking is the attempt to invade the information security of another. Okay, it's not just that. The way in which users protect their data is they use something called a security control. Now they can passwords, firewalls, air gapping. That's called a security control. That enforces the rights and permissions you want to give to yourself and to others. Hacking is defeating that security control that is designed to protect your information security and thereby invading it. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Sean and let him go take the next step.
We're moving along here. We're going to do some fun command line exercises now. Okay, so you all, or at least a subset of you, I hope, have looked at the homework. And those of you just joining, that's cool. You can take your time, go back to the GitHub repo, and do some of the commands that we had up. Scott did some videos that you can watch and walk through about the file system, about navigating and doing some basic commands. I'm going to do just a little bit of a refresher and show some commands which we may or may not have done before, and just a reminder on some basics of navigating in the terminal, because we got a few questions about that. Then I'm going to show you how to view processes in the terminal. Now that's important because Scott will, after I show you this, go into some more about the operating system structure, this kernel sort of kernel space, user space delineation, which we're going to be hammering home and which is really important to hackers. Okay, so first I just want to say, for those of you who are in your command line, it's not going to look just like this. I'm in a sort of demo operating system where we're going to do that cool keylogger thing. So for right now, just follow the commands, look at the commands. You can follow along either in that browser terminal that we linked to or in your Kali VirtualBox, which I hope you have up. First, I'm going to cd space tilde. Now that tilde goes to my home directory. And how do I know I'm in my home directory? Well, I can do pwd for print working directory, and I get /home/Kali. So the Kali user, okay, at the Kali hostname. Then you'll see the tilde here for the path, and then you'll see this $sign. Now, when you look up, let's say you search for some help online and commands and so on, you will often see that $sign as sort of a shorthand for command line prompt. That's the delineator for the prompt. Okay, cool. Now, a few other tricks here. Let's say I do an ls for a directory listing. I've got my desktop folder, I got my downloads, etc. Let's say I want to change into my desktop directory, but I just put a capital D in, right? If I hit tab twice, it will give me all of the directories and sometimes files, depending on the setup of what you have in the directory, that match that string. So if you had a bunch of stuff that started with capital A or lowercase a, and you put those in and you hit tab, this is what you would get, okay? But what that does mean is it does a nice little autofill for you, right? Let's say I just do desk and then I hit tab, it automatically fills in desktop. For desktop, this is no big deal, right? But when you're in, a folder with these huge log files that may have like long dates or numbers or hashes, which we're going to do later in the course, you definitely need to use that tab. It will, save you a lot of trouble. Another thing that'll save you a lot of trouble is the history in your terminal. Most of these command line programs, these terminal programs, have a history that they keep of the previous commands that you entered. So if I hit the up arrow, I'm going to see that cd desktop is there. I'm also going to see ls, which I just entered. And I'm also going to see pwd, right? So that history is there, in the terminal. That history is stored in a file, of course. Everything's a file in Unix, Linux, this world we're in. So it's something that you may want to clear, especially if you're a hacker and you want to go into a system and you don't want to leave your tracks around, right? So to clear that history, you type the command history space -c. Okay? Very cool. Now we can clear the actual screen because it's getting a little messy by typing clear. Brings us back up to the top here with a clean view. And let's just keep moving here. One of the things we showed you before, but which we should definitely do again, is make a directory. And I want to show you sort of the interplay between the graphical environment and the command line environment, which is one of the reasons we're doing this. So if I mkdir, make directory, space, we'll call it chicken this time around. You will see a directory just magically appear on my desktop called chicken, right? Very cool that you have this sort of interplay between command line and graphical environment, and that'll be very useful as you go through your hacks and start to kind of do what I'm doing right now, kind of like run people through how you did it and so on. Okay, now I'm going to cd into chicken, and I'm going to do an ls, nothing there. Okay, well, let's put something there. So I'm going to do touch, which just creates a file that's completely 0 bytes, just a file name listing in the operating system, and I'm going to call it sunny.txt. So we love Sunny, we just saw her. Okay, so now when you do your ls, you're going to see sunny.txt. Let's do ls with a modifier, an option, a switch, whatever you want to use, linguistics you want to use. ls space -l will give us that list view, which is that longer, sort of more detailed view. And you'll see here the permissions, which we'll go through in a couple of weeks. The owner, the group, which are both called Kali. Usually the user has a group assigned to them with the same name. So if this were Sean, it'd be Sean Sean, or Scott Scott, so on and so forth. 0 bytes, so that's an empty file and created just now. So very cool stuff. Now let's edit it really quickly. We're going to do nano space Sunny, and I'm going to just do SU, and I'm going to hit tab. Bam, autofills. All right, it's empty. What do we say? We say, don't be so pissed off. I did my homework. That's what I have to say to Sunny right now. And you'll see there's a little toolbar sort of thing at the bottom of this screen. These, terminal interfaces try to mimic what we now call a GUI or graphical interface a little bit, and they resemble, if you used DOS back in the day and those kinds of things, that kind of interface. So if I hit Control X, it'll say save. So that was that caret and that X at the bottom of that toolbar, Control X or Command X on a Mac. Save modified buffer, yes, I'm going to hit the Y. File name to write, Sunny, just call it that, hit enter. And now when I ls -L, bam, it's got 46 bytes in there for the characters that I put in. That's all we'll do now, Scott. I think we'll send it back to you, and then we'll do the keylogger, and then if I have time to roll in some other useful commands, we'll do that then. Okay?
Fantastic. Thank you, Sean. I want to talk about operating systems because, first of all, they're awesome. I'll say why they're awesome. But also, one of the things I really wanted to learn about hacking for was, it just seemed like magic. And it's great that we're doing a keylogger today, because I often thought, how in the world does a hacker on the other side of the world, how can they know what I'm typing? And I hope to kind of explain it to you in somewhat of an abstract way, but in a way that hopefully explains why keylogging is possible, why a lot of this stuff is possible. Okay, so let me first say, what is an operating system? The operating system is the thing that allows your application to talk to your hardware. Okay, so we're running Crowdcast right now and probably a lot of other applications, and you have whatever machine you have, and it has hardware, and it has a mouse and a glide pad and a webcam and all this stuff, and your operating system sits between those two things. Okay, it is something that without it, every application would have to be written for your machine, your kind of machine, and your kind of screen and your kind of mouse. And what the operating system is, it handles all that stuff. So it'd be unbelievably horrible without operating system. Operating systems, Windows 10 is, I think, 50 million lines of code long. So it's about like 1,500-page books. I mean, it's a crazy thing that human beings have been able to invent something like that. Okay, so let me go here. Okay, this is a kind of an abstract representation of how you, the user, relate to the hardware and what's in between. Okay, and basically your operating system is in between you and the hardware. In this case, there's something called the kernel. That's the Linux penguin there. Let me extend to what a kernel is, okay? A kernel is like the most trusted part of the operating system. It handles the most sensitive operations, like accessing memory, accessing your screen, opening and closing files, accessing your hard drive. I like to think of the kernel like a waiter. So you know how like when you go into a restaurant, you order something, you tell the waiter what you want. You don't go into the kitchen and take the stuff off the stove. That would be dangerous. It would also involve you bumping into a lot of people. It would be mayhem. What you do is you order what you want with the waiter, and the waiter goes into the kitchen and gets the food. That's like the kernel. The kernel is the part of the operating system that is trusted to take your order, go to the stove, which is dangerous and hot, and takes it back out to you. Okay, so imagine. Let's go to this to the slide I have here. So imagine you tap on your keyboard. That electrical signal that you hit the letter K goes up to the kernel and says and essentially asking the kernel for permission to go to the screen, because nothing can go to the screen without passing through the kernel. So it goes to the kernel. The kernel, if the kernel says, yes, K, you can go to the screen, it sends it to the displays server. That is the part of your operating system that displays things on your screen. And then you probably have a desktop a graphical interface, often called a GUI, a graphical user interface, and then to the users, and the user sees it. If you click on your mouse, first the mouse says to the kernel, we want to open this file, and then roughly at the same time, the GUI is telling the kernel, oh, the mouse just clicked on this file. So the kernel has to navigate tons of things, but like it runs with the most privileges. And if you can get inside the kernel, the user's screwed. So this is the Linux kernel map. It's let me get a bigger shot of this. Like in some sense, this is supposed to intimidate you. Well, it intimidates me. This is like showing how much stuff goes on in a kernel. Okay, but like one of the things is helpful to me, at least, if you look to the bottom where it says electronics, the bottom of the I can use my cursor here, because my kernel will let me do it. So what does the kernel do? Well, it handles I/O, input, output. So like all your USB stuff, all the stuff we stick into our computers, the kernel has to manage that. The CPU, the central processing unit, kind of the so-called brains of the computer, the thing that does the computation. Memory, stuff that holds the data and code. Disk controllers, this is basically a hard drive and various kind of fixed disk things that we have now. Network controllers, so the kernel also controls how your computer speaks to other computers. And then finally, user peripherals like your mouse, your keyboard, your screen, your webcam, all that stuff. So the kernel's doing so much, and it's doing it in a way which fulfills the following three functions. Okay. Number one is the operating system is a security guard, meaning that if I have an account on the same Yale system that Sean does, okay, but the operating system prevents me from accessing with Sean's data and vice versa. This is often called process isolation, where what the kernel does is it makes sure that the programs that you're running stay in their own part of memory so that they don't interfere with other people's programs, but just as importantly, don't interfere with your own program. So let's say your email client crashes, so Outlook crashes, okay? You don't want Crowdcast to crash as well, okay? So why is that possible? Because the operating system is running the program in running your email client in one part of memory, but Crowdcast in another. And if it crashes in one part of memory, it doesn't bleed over. That's what the operating system is supposed to do. So the thing is, you think that you're the only one using the computer, the server, but in fact, like tons of people around Yale, they're also using the computer. I'm running multiple programs right now. How can the computer do that? Well, what the operating system does is it's so fast that it switches back and forth so that you can't tell that your computer is checking your email while you're riveted by my hand gesticulations. Okay. Finally, it's the back office manager. It handles all that crap like drivers and making sure that the applications that you run on the architecture that you're running on. Like if you have new Apple chips, like the operating system is going to have to translate applications for this new architecture, and some of them have Apple hasn't yet managed to do that for VirtualBox for its new chipset. Okay, so this is like, I don't want to hear anybody say bad things about operating systems. They're our friend. Okay. Last two quick things because they're really important, and then I'm going to switch this over to Sean. We've been using this word process. And what is a process? A process is an instance of a program running. So we are all running the same version, I assume, of Crowdcast, but I'm running mine, you're running yours, Sean's running his. So even though we're running the same program, my process is different than Sean's process is different than your process. Okay, so a program in execution is a process. Okay, now this is an extremely important idea, which is that a process can either run in what's called kernel mode or user mode, sometimes called kernel land and user land, or kernel space and user space. The idea is that when a process runs in the kernel, it runs with complete privileges because it's got to do stuff. Like it's in the process, it's in the kernel for a reason. Okay, if a process runs in user space, which is basically Crowdcast and Microsoft Word and all our applications, we're all running in user space. Those processes have limited permission. Okay, so let me just over here again. The operating system has two modes that it runs processes: kernel mode, where you have complete permission; user mode, where you have limited permissions. Obviously, what you want is to get from user land into kernel land. The keylogger that Sean will show you does just that. Okay, over to you, Sean.
Okay, so this is a virtual machine, very much like your Kali virtual machine, as I said before. But it's a purposefully vulnerable virtual machine that I set up for this demonstration. You'll see quite a few of the demos that at least I do are going to be this way. It doesn't mean you can't do these hacks on your own, or you can't pwn your own Kali, et cetera, et cetera. But of course, I want to make sure these things work and that they work in the most simplistic way possible, and that we can sort of get through these basic concepts by demonstrating. As we get into more advanced hacks and so on, we're going to be using Kali directly. We had some questions about Kali. You do need Kali eventually if you want to participate, sort of do the hack contest and so on and so forth. But for right now, if you don't have it set up, we'll do our best to get you set up. I think most folks, we've been able to get them through some pretty difficult errors, so I have faith we can get there. Okay, cool. So we're going to demonstrate a keylogger here. And this keylogger is one of many, as you can see. If you go out to github.com, you'll see I was a little taken aback that there were this many, but I guess I should know better by now. More than 8,000 repository results. So these are things you can just easily install, Windows, Linux, Mac, etc. Most of these are user space keyloggers, or at least the ones that I'm seeing come up here. And that's because, as somebody asked in the chat, whether most attacks are in user space. Yes, at least in my experience, at least in the organizational surveys I've seen and the data I've seen from cybersecurity orgs, most attacks are in user space. And they're usually really, really simple. Phishing is still the #1 attack vector. Okay, and that means, if you get a phishing email and you go out to a website and you accidentally install something thinking it's something else, or clicking on something you think is a PDF, maybe it's malicious, it has some code in there, that can pwn your system, right? That can create a situation where your system is controlled by someone else or is attacked by someone else. And as Scott was showing with all that sort of chart, that high-level, chart, user space is generally restricted to a certain area. It doesn't mean it's not harmful. All your files are in user space, right, for your user. There's a lot of stuff that you do in user space, obviously your web browsing and so on. But the thing that's pernicious and interesting about kernel space, and the reason we're going to do a kernel space keylogger, is because it can't be detected using normal methods, okay? It's able to hide itself. And if you get a keylogger, or sometimes these things are called rootkits, different types of malware that install and latch onto the kernel or some part of the boot process, right? So that when you boot your machine, this stuff runs. And now, when you run an antivirus program, let's say, and you try to scan for this stuff, it's very likely that the program is going to be able to evade detection. So then what do? You throw out your operating system, basically, and it's not a good solution. But ransomware, the really pernicious sort of stuff that's spread that cyber folks are really worried about as a serious threat, that stuff tends to be in kernel space and modify the kernel, and it needs to be able to get like full control of the system, right? Okay. The keylogger we're going to demonstrate here is something called Key Sniffer. It's just some simple demonstration here, and you'll see here the module has been camouflaged to blend in with other kernel modules. So this is exactly the kind of nasty thing that you don't want on your system. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to freaking do something with it. Okay, I'm in the desktop. And again, don't do this on your Kali. You don't have this keylogger. You can certainly, as part of one of your hacks, incorporate a keylogger by following these instructions, and I'll make sure that the commands and the link out to all this stuff is in the GitHub repository as well. Okay, so I'm in my desktop. I'm going to CD into this Key Sniffer folder, which you can also see on the left-hand side there. And I'm going to do an ls and see what I got here. Well, I got a bunch of files. These files were compiled by me earlier, meaning I took the source code that I got off of GitHub. I ran literally a handful of commands. I think it's 3. And those commands turn these files into executable binaries, right? Programs that I can run now. These files that start with .ko are kernel modules. Modules are drivers, we call them sometimes, especially in Windows environments, you would call them a drivers, and you'd have a driver file. And they latch onto the kernel. So they run in the kernel space, executed by the kernel, and unless they announce themselves, right, as a process that you can see, then you're not going to be able to detect them. Okay. So I'm going to load this kernel module that's going to just log everything that we type. And it's pretty shocking, but hopefully we can get that across. I know you think I'm doing magic here, but I need to remind you that script kiddies, so to speak, people who don't have a whole lot of technical expertise and just read a README on the internet, can do this sort of thing if they get access to your system, or if they trick you into giving them access, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a command called sudo. Again, this is something I'm going to put in the notes, but this is super user do. This is a command that allows you to act as the super user, the head administrator, the root user, right? There's a joke out there, somebody says, hey, make me a sandwich, right? And then it's sudo make me a sandwich, and they do it, right? They don't have a choice. That's kind of the way you'll see with this command. We use it quite a bit, and you'll be using it when you do your hacks. So sudo gives me that sort of super user permission. Then I do insmod. I'm going to insert a module into the kernel. And then it's going to be this file, kisney.ko. Okay, that's the kernel module that's going to do the key logging. I hit enter. I have to enter my password, which gives me that root level access, and bam. Okay. Now that's only possible because this Kali user has those privileges, right? You can have users on your system, let's say you're an administrator, that don't have that level of privilege. We show you all this scary stuff. We show you all this stacked, crazy diagrams and so on. But we have administrative tools, right, system administrators, good network admins, and cybersecurity folks to sort of lock down systems, to make sure that folks only have the amount of privileges that they need to have. It's called the principle of least privilege, right? In this case, of course, we're using something that's not secure and something that we want to be able to hack, so this user just has full, carte blanche, so to speak, to do what they want. All right, so that's loaded. Let's say, for example, I now actually want to go and make that Sunny folder again. So I'm going to cd ... I'm going to make dir. What am I missing? That's right. I didn't put the name of the folder. Where is my head? But you'll see when I do that, I get this helpful make dir help. It tells me, hey, you left something out. Maybe you need to read the manual, which I do need to RTFM. Okay, make dir space chicken. You'll see the chicken folder. It's kind of overlapped here, but there it is. Right. Now I'm going to cd into that chicken. And again, this is a useful thing. Hackers need to be able to navigate the file system. That's why we're sort of going slowly through these things. And I'll try to show you those within the context of hacking, right? Okay, and now I'm going to create that Sunny file again. So touch space Sunny. I'll do sunny-chicken this time, .text. Okay, got an empty file. I do an ls. I clear because there's too much stuff here. Now, let's say I just want to talk about how awesome the class is, and I want to say, hey, this class is awesome. That's not a command, right? It's not going to do anything good, right? But it is key presses, right? So you'll see in a moment, this will be in the key log that the keylogger has absconded. And let's open up Firefox, right? I'm a user. I don't know that I have this malicious keylogger, and I go out to Lawfare blog because I want to read the latest amazing national security news. Okay. And I go out there and I click on some stuff, right? And then maybe I search for something. I'm not sure where the search is, but that's okay. Let's say I go out to Google and I search for something. And again, I'm going to look for chickens because I'm on that kick right now. So I get all this stuff about chickens, right? Now, let's see what the keylogger shows. Okay. So the keylogger itself is creating a file. It's creating a log. The person designed it to do this. There's a number of ways that keyloggers can be designed. They can create a file and upload it to some cloud storage or to some dark web storage, which will show you how to quote-unquote exfiltrate files in that way, where you can really get stuff off of a system anonymously. But this one is just kind of simple and just is keeping the file on my system for now. So I'm going to do sudo space cat, which allows you to read files or concatenate output. It's a little more complex, so you don't need to know it, at least not right now. And I know where this file is because I'm a hacker and I set this up and I want this to be like hidden sort of in the operating system, right? So it's got this huge path. It's in / which is the top level. It's in sys, kernel, debug, kisney, and then it's a file called keys. Okay? And when I hit enter, look at that. I've got these commands that I entered, cd ... make dir, even me hitting the up arrow, right, to go through the command, then chicken, cd chicken. I create my file. I type this stuff. Now here's me going to Lawfare blog. And apparently I hit backspace and I didn't realize it. And then I got .com or hit left right arrow and I didn't realize it. Then I went out to Google and I looked up chickens. Okay, so this is the kind of intimate data that you could get if I typed a whole email to my, grandmother. That would be in here. And a hacker could set up a service, basically, where this runs in the background, runs in that kernel space. You're not able to detect it using normal means, and basically it just watches everything the user does. You could upload that log to some server. The hacker could then search through that log with clever ways of searching through for the most intimate data or the most useful data. This is how people figure out passwords, right? Doesn't matter if the user interface, right, if the browser shows asterisks, I would have typed it. And as Scott said, this is because the kernel has to tell, right, the programs in user space. It has to translate those key presses that we physically do on the keyboard into actual text, in this case in the English language, in these programs. So it's sort of like the keylogger is just an intermediary hanging out and reading all of that. Now I'm going to do one more thing, which is kind of interesting, which will just kind of really drive the point home, I hope. I'm going to clear the screen. I'm going to hit the up arrow here so I get my command again. Again, this is why you want that history. You're a hacker. You don't feel like typing that again. Okay, now let's say in this chicken folder, I want to say, this is for Sunny.txt. So now I'm just going to send to Sunny, who's pretty pissed off chicken, as I've let you all know. I'm going to just create a text file that's a copy of the text file that's already sitting on the system, just reading everything we type. I'm going to send that out to my chicken. So this is for Sunny. Oh man, now if I look in the chicken folder, what am I going to see? I'm going to see this file right here. This is for Sunny. I open that up, and bam, there's everything I was typing. So yeah, pretty dangerous. Don't let your chickens steal your keys. Don't let them install a keylogger and read everything you're doing on and off the internet. So that's pretty much it there. I joked about this. This is something that you really should know. There's a lot of people who want to make jokes on the internet, okay? And you have to be very careful, especially when you're a quote-unquote noob. If you don't know this environment, if you haven't spent a lot of time doing this sort of thing, you'll see in forums people make jokes and so on, and you don't want to just copy-paste stuff off the internet into your terminal and just run it. You have to be very careful, right? So actually, let me first just do cd ... I'll go up one level. And I'm going to remove this chicken directory because I actually don't want this on my system anymore. I want to make sure that it doesn't exist, right? So I'm going to use the rm command for remove, so you delete stuff. Then I'm going to use a switch. It's dash capital R. That means recursive. That's what you have to use on directories, and they'll delete the directory and everything under the directory, okay? I'm going to type chicken. And you'll see, bam, it's gone. You have to be careful with this command. It's gone. You're not going to be able to recover that. In some cases, maybe you could use some forensic tools, right? But especially with solid-state drives these days, it's a lot harder than it used to be. That chicken directory is gone. Okay, now let me get rid of this tester here. I'm just going to hit the up arrow. I'm just going to change it to tester. Created that earlier. Bam, gone. Okay, you see how easy it is to just wipe stuff in your system. Now, a joke on the internet is rm minus capital R, F for force. You can put these switches, these options next to each other without a space, and then /. Now, if you recall, / is the tippity top of the directory tree, okay? If you do this, it will try to, at least, delete as many files as it possibly can, okay? I'm going to hit Control-C or Command-C on a Mac to kill that command and just give me a new, fresh line because I don't want to run it. If I hit Enter, it would try to run. And if I try that command now with sudo in front of it, it actually would run. And I don't know, I guess I don't care about this virtual machine, so why don't I run it? So sudo space rm space minus capital R F /. This is not to scare you, but this is to show you how powerful these tools can be, and also why, that V for verbose, why we have you do stuff in virtual machines and not on your own system. Okay, hit enter. Oh, look at that. It tells me bad idea. Oh, man. All right, well, let's just override that. No, it tells me exactly how to override it. And I'm hit enter. And it's just deleting my operating system. So there we go. So we could watch this. Oh, shut down. Gone. That's the end of it. And that's how that works. So thank you, Scott, for reminding me. That was pretty fun.
That's one of the points of having this virtualization software, whether it's Parallels or VirtualBox or VMware or stuff like that. It isolates your machine in terms of process isolation. Basically, when your VirtualBox is one giant process, and it is isolated from the rest of your operating system. So that's why it's safe to use. But and thank you, Sean, for taking one for the team, deleting, even though it's a virtual hard drive. It's got to hurt. Okay, want to bring on? Yeah. But that's a wiper. I mean, that was a wiper. He wiped everything on the hard drive. Not very elegant, but effective. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week.